The first thing I noticed was the printer sitting on the hallway floor. It was tilted against the wall with the paper tray hanging open, and a stack of client tax forms had been placed on top of it like junk mail. My locked filing cabinet stood beside the laundry room. One drawer had been forced halfway open because someone had tried to move it without the key. I followed the sound of voices toward the room at the end of the hall. My office door was open. My desk had been pushed against the window. My 2 monitors were unplugged. My shelves had been emptied, and the framed business license I kept above my desk was lying face down on the carpet. In the center of the room was a queen-sized bed. My mother-in-law, Diane, sat on the edge of it, while my husband, Ethan, tightened a screw in the new headboard. 3 of her suitcases were lined up beside the wall. Her television was already mounted where my planning board had been that morning. Ethan glanced up and smiled as if he had replaced a light fixture. "Good, you're home. Mom's officially moved in." For several seconds, I could not answer. I had left at 9 that morning to meet a client whose company employed 43 people. When I returned at 4, the room from which I ran my bookkeeping and payroll business had been converted into a bedroom without a single conversation. "Where is my computer equipment?" I asked. "Most of it is in the dining room," Ethan said. "You can set up at the table." Diane folded her hands in her lap. "It's only until we figure out something permanent." I looked at Ethan. "You moved your mother into my office." His expression changed immediately. The smile disappeared, replaced by the patient look he used when he wanted other people to believe I was being difficult. "Claire, Mom needs an actual room. You work on a laptop. It's not like this is a real office job." Diane did not correct him. From the hallway, Ethan's sister Melissa said, "He's right. Family should matter more than a hobby." That was the moment something in me went quiet. I did not yell. I did not drag the mattress outside. I did not beg them to understand what that room meant. I picked up the business license from the floor, wiped a streak of dust from the frame, and asked Ethan one question. "How long have you been planning this?" He looked toward his mother before answering. "A few weeks." That meant everyone in the room had known except me. I nodded once. Then I carried my locked cabinet into the garage, loaded my computers into my car, and drove away. That night, while Ethan was telling his family that I would calm down, I opened the folder containing the documents for the larger house we were supposed to buy together. And I quietly changed our housing plan. Welcome to RedditGossipR. And this is the story of the day I realized my husband did not see my work, my money, or even my home as mine. He saw them as resources he could redistribute whenever his family needed something. Ethan and I had been married for 7 years. When we met, I worked in the accounting department of a regional shipping company in Columbus, Ohio. He sold commercial flooring and could charm almost anyone within 5 minutes. He remembered birthdays, brought coffee to receptionists, and could make a story about being stuck in traffic sound entertaining. I was the opposite. I noticed mismatched numbers. I kept receipts. I arrived 10 minutes early, and never understood why people made promises they had not checked whether they could keep. At first, those differences seemed to balance us. 3 years into our marriage, my father died and left me $68,000 from the sale of his small house. I used $45,000 as the down payment on the 3-bedroom home Ethan and I moved into. The mortgage was placed in both our names because we were married and building a life together. I never regretted that decision at the time. The house was not extravagant. It had faded siding, an aging furnace, and a backyard that turned into mud every spring. But it was ours, and the smallest bedroom had a wide window overlooking a maple tree. That room became my office after the shipping company eliminated my position. Instead of applying immediately for another corporate job, I used part of my severance to start a bookkeeping service for local businesses. I already had 3 former vendors asking whether I could handle their accounts independently. Ethan told me to try it. "You've carried companies twice your size," he said. "You can do this." For the first 6 months, I worked longer hours than I had at the shipping company and earned less money. Ethan covered more of the groceries during that period, and I never forgot it. That was one reason I tolerated so much later. By the end of my second year, the business was profitable. I handled payroll, expense reporting, quarterly filings, and financial cleanup for 14 clients. I did not become wealthy, but I earned more than I had in my former job. More importantly, I had built something reliable. My office was not decorative. It contained 2 encrypted computers, a commercial scanner, locked files, a backup server, and records I was legally and professionally responsible for protecting. Ethan knew that. He also knew I had client calls every weekday and payroll deadlines that could not be moved because his mother needed a television wall. Diane became part of our financial life about 18 months after my business started. Her husband had died without enough life insurance, and she struggled to maintain the apartment they had shared. Ethan asked whether we could send her $600 a month until she adjusted. I agreed. I also helped her organize the medical bills and utility accounts that had been in her husband's name. When her car needed repairs, I paid $1,200 directly to the mechanic. When her rent increased, I found 3 senior apartment programs and completed the applications with her. She rejected all 3. One was too far from Melissa. One had small closets. One did not allow her to keep the dining table she had owned for 30 years. Each refusal came with the same explanation. I've already lost so much. I shouldn't have to lose everything. I understood grief, so I kept helping. What I did not understand was that grief had slowly become a permanent exemption from every difficult decision. Ethan began spending more time at her apartment. He repaired shelves, picked up groceries, and handled her banking because she said online accounts confused her. Whenever I asked how much we were contributing, he said it was still around $600. I believed him. That was my first mistake. My second was believing that Ethan still understood the difference between helping someone and volunteering another person's life. 2 months before Diane appeared in my office, Ethan suggested we buy a larger house. He found a 5-bedroom property outside Dublin with a finished basement and a small first-floor suite. His proposal was that Diane could eventually live with us while still having some privacy. I did not immediately reject the idea. Diane's rent had increased again, and I was tired of emergency calls every time something broke in her apartment. A separate suite could have worked if we agreed on expenses, boundaries, and caregiving responsibilities. The house cost $520,000. We could qualify only by combining Ethan's salary with my business income. The down payment would require approximately $105,000 after selling our current home. Most of that amount would have come from the equity created by my original down payment and the mortgage payments I had been making. I told Ethan I would consider it, but only after we reviewed the numbers with my accountant and signed a written agreement about Diane's expenses. He said that was reasonable. Then he began speaking as though the decision had already been made. He showed Diane pictures of the suite. He told Melissa which room her children could use when they visited. He asked a contractor about installing a second kitchenette. Every time I reminded him that we had not committed, he laughed. You always need 10 spreadsheets before you let yourself be happy. 3 weeks before the office takeover, we submitted a preliminary offer contingent on financing, inspection, and the sale of our current home. We still had several opportunities to withdraw. I had not transferred any down payment money. That detail mattered later. The evening Ethan moved Diane in, I drove to a co-working building where one of my clients rented space. The manager, Priya, had once offered me an unused office during renovations. I called her from the parking lot and explained that I needed a secure room immediately. She did not ask for the family version of the story. She asked what equipment I had and whether my files were encrypted. Within an hour, I had my computers locked in a temporary office on the 2nd floor. It cost $350 a week, which I had not budgeted for, but at least my client information was safe. Then I opened the house purchase folder. The lender had sent several forms that afternoon. One asked for confirmation of the source of our down payment. Another listed my projected business income as the primary qualifying income for the loan. Ethan had already completed parts of the worksheet. Beside the line marked borrower contribution, he had written $105,000 under my name. Beside his own name, he had written $15,000. Under occupancy plan, he had listed Diane as a dependent family member who would reside with us without contributing rent. No one had discussed that with me. I emailed the loan officer and the real estate agent. I stated that I did not authorize the submission of any financial documents beyond what I had personally provided. I withdrew my consent to move forward with the purchase and asked for written confirmation that no application would be processed using my business income. Then I sent Ethan a message. I will not purchase another house with you. We will discuss the current house after my business property is secured. His response arrived less than a minute later. Are you seriously punishing my mother because you lost a room? I looked at the sentence for a long time. He had not asked whether the files were safe. He had not apologized for exposing client records. He had not asked what the co-working office would cost. To him, I had lost a room. To me, he had taken the part of our home that allowed me to earn most of the money keeping that home running. When I returned at 10 that night, Diane's photographs were arranged on my shelves. My desk had been moved into the dining area. One monitor sat beside a bowl of fruit. The router cable stretched across the floor where anyone could trip over it. Ethan waited in the kitchen with his arms folded. You embarrassed me, he said. You moved someone into my workplace. She's my mother. And I'm your wife. She had nowhere else to go. That isn't true. She had an apartment until the end of next month. His eyes shifted. That was the first sign that the story was larger than he had admitted. I asked why Diane had moved out early. He said the landlord wanted the unit back. When I asked whether there was a written notice, he told me not everything needed to become an audit. Then Diane walked into the kitchen wearing the robe I had given her for Christmas. Ethan said you were ready for me, she said. He said this was part of the transition to the new house. I looked at him. You told her I agreed? I told her you would understand. No, you told her something that was not true because you assumed I would be too ashamed to contradict you. Melissa, who had stayed to help unpack, stepped into the doorway. Claire, she's a widow. Do you hear how cold you sound? I turned to her. Did Ethan tell you I paid the down payment on this house? She frowned. He told us you both did. Did he tell you my income is the reason we qualified for the new mortgage? That's not relevant. It became relevant when the three of you decided my office was disposable. Ethan slammed his palm against the counter. Enough. You are not turning this into some power game because your little company had a good year. There it was again. Little company. Hobby. Lost room. Each phrase reduced my contribution just enough to make taking it seem reasonable. I told them I would be staying at a hotel for 2 nights while I arranged secure access to my equipment. I also said no one was to touch the filing cabinet in the garage. Ethan laughed without humor. You're leaving your own house over a desk? No, I said. I'm leaving tonight because I do not trust you around property you have already decided does not belong to me. That was the first clear boundary I had set in years. It did not feel empowering. It felt like nausea. The next morning, one of my largest clients called. A payroll processing file had failed to upload because my server had been disconnected during the move. I had restored the backup, but 27 employees received their deposits several hours late. The client was not cruel. He was simply direct. We hired you because reliability was the one thing we could not compromise. I explained only that there had been an unauthorized disruption at my office, and that I had relocated the system. He said he would review our contract. That afternoon, he gave 30 days' notice. The account represented almost $18,000 a year. When I told Ethan, he said, "Maybe now you'll see why working from home was never sustainable." I remember staring at him across the kitchen table and realizing he had found a way to make the damage he caused sound like proof that he had been right. Diane sat beside him, silent. I asked her whether she believed I should lose a client so she could have that room. She looked down at her coffee. "I didn't ask you to lose anything." "No. You just moved into the space after seeing my equipment in the hallway." Her face tightened. "Ethan said you barely used it anymore." I turned to him. He had told each person a different version. To me, Diane had nowhere else to go. To Diane, I had approved the move. To Melissa, the room was an underused hobby space. To the family, the larger house was practically purchased. I stopped trying to win the argument. Instead, I began checking the numbers. My accountant, Luis, had handled my business returns since the first year. I asked him to help me separate three things: business expenses, household contributions, and money transferred to Diane. He reminded me that he could organize the records but could not make decisions about marital property. For that, he recommended a family law attorney named Rebecca Shaw. I scheduled a consultation. Before the appointment, I downloaded 4 years of statements from our joint account, my business account, and the personal account where I deposited my owner distributions. The pattern was clear within an hour. The mortgage was technically paid from the joint checking account, just as Ethan had always claimed. But 82% of the money entering that account came from me. Every month, I transferred enough to cover the mortgage, property taxes, insurance, utilities, and groceries. Ethan deposited a fixed amount that covered less than half of those expenses. The rest of his salary went into an account I could not access. That arrangement had begun when he said commission income was unpredictable and he needed a separate account for business travel. I had not questioned it because the bills were being paid. Then I searched the joint account for transfers to Diane. We had agreed on $600 a month. The actual average was $1,840. Some months, it exceeded $2,500. The transfers had vague labels such as household, pharmacy, or repair. Several were sent on the same day Ethan told me his commission check had been delayed. Over 18 months, more than $33,000 had gone to Diane. Most of that money had originated from my deposits. I felt embarrassed before I felt angry. I had built a business around finding financial patterns for other people, yet I had avoided examining my own marriage because I was afraid of what the numbers might say. Luis helped me create a clean schedule showing each deposit and payment. He did not call Ethan a thief. He did not speculate about intention. He only said, "These records do not match the arrangement you described to me." Rebecca, the attorney, was equally careful. She explained that because both our names were on the deed and mortgage, I could not simply order Ethan out or sell the house alone. My original down payment and disproportionate contributions could matter in a divorce or negotiated settlement, but the outcome would depend on documentation and state law. "What can I do now?" I asked. "Protect your business records, stop making new joint commitments, document the condition of the home, and decide whether your goal is reconciliation, financial separation, or physical separation." I wanted to say reconciliation. Instead, I heard myself answer, "I don't know if there is a marriage left to reconcile." That was the first time I said it aloud. I opened a new household account in my name and redirected my business distributions there. I continued paying my documented share of essential expenses so the mortgage would not fall behind, but I stopped depositing extra money into the joint account. I changed the passwords to my business systems and removed the backup server from the house. I photographed the damaged filing cabinet and the client documents left in the hallway. I also sent Ethan a written notice that I did not consent to Diane using my office permanently and that all future discussions about the home needed to happen in writing. He responded by calling his family. Within 2 days, I received messages from 6 relatives. One aunt said marriage was about compromise. A cousin accused me of making an elderly woman homeless. Melissa wrote that my obsession with money had finally revealed my character. Ethan told them I had emptied our accounts. I had not. He told them I was refusing to pay the mortgage. I was still paying more than he was. He told them I had canceled the new house without warning after he had spent months arranging a safe home for his mother. He did not mention that he had planned to use my income and equity without a written agreement. For several days, I tried correcting each accusation. Then Priya asked me a question. What happens after you prove the same fact to the 10th person? I did not have an answer. She placed a key card for the co-working office on the desk. People who want the truth ask for records. People who want a villain ask for a story. Stop giving your energy to the wrong group. I began saving every message instead of answering it. A week later, the loan officer called. She had halted the application as requested, but she wanted clarification about a document Ethan had uploaded through the shared portal. It was a spreadsheet titled Phase 2 Housing Plan. I had never seen it. Because my name was listed as a borrower, and the file had been submitted as part of our joint application, she provided me with a copy. The first page summarized the new house. The second listed projected monthly expenses. The third page changed everything. Ethan had created a section called Funding Sources. My contribution included the estimated equity from our current house, $90,000 from my business reserves, and $12,000 from my personal savings. His contribution included $15,000 and management of household transition. Diane's contribution was listed as 0. Below that was a note. Claire's funds to be treated as marital contribution, not ownership adjustment. Another line projected that my business income would increase by 20% after moving, because I would save commercial office costs. He had planned for me to work from the basement storage room. The first floor suite would belong to Diane. At the bottom of the spreadsheet was a private note he had apparently forgotten to remove before uploading it. Once Mom is established, Claire will not reverse the decision without looking cruel. That sentence was the twist I had not wanted to find. Moving Diane into my office had not been an impulsive response to an emergency. It had been a test. Ethan wanted to make the arrangement emotionally irreversible before I saw the complete financial plan. If I objected after Diane moved in, I would become the woman throwing out a widow. If I accepted it, he would use that acceptance to push me into the larger house. He had not underestimated my income. He had counted on it. He had not dismissed my business because he believed it was worthless. He dismissed it because acknowledging its value would require acknowledging my authority over the money it produced. I sent the spreadsheet to Rebecca and Luis. Then I asked Ethan, in writing, whether he had created it. He replied, "It was just a rough planning document. Stop trying to criminalize normal marriage discussions." I asked why it said I would look cruel if I reversed the decision. He did not answer. Instead, he retaliated. The next morning, my key code no longer opened the front door. I still had a physical key, but the smart lock had been changed. When I entered, Ethan accused me of frightening Diane by arriving without warning. "This is my house too," I said. "You left. I stayed at a hotel because you dismantled my workplace. You're creating a hostile environment for Mom." Diane stood behind him with red eyes. On the dining table sat several envelopes addressed to her at our house. She had already changed her mailing address. Ethan told me he had spoken to an attorney and that I could not remove Diane without his consent. I said I would not debate legal claims in the kitchen. Then I went to the garage. My filing cabinet was gone. For the first time, I raised my voice. "Where are my files?" Ethan followed me outside. I put the cabinet in storage. Mom needed room for some boxes. You removed confidential client records from the property? They're locked. Where? A storage facility. Which facility? He refused to tell me. That was his second victory. The first had cost me a client. The second placed my professional reputation at risk. I called Rebecca from the driveway. She told me to document the conversation, send a written demand for the location of the cabinet, and contact the police through the non-emergency line if I believed business property had been taken without permission. The responding officer did not arrest anyone or declare who owned what. He took a report, spoke to Ethan, and advised him that withholding business records could create serious complications. Only then did Ethan reveal the storage location. He had rented the unit in his own name. When we opened it, I found my cabinet behind dining chairs, boxes of Christmas decorations, and Diane's old mattress. The lock was scratched, but the files were still inside. I moved everything to the co-working office that afternoon. Then I made the decision I had been postponing. I told Rebecca to begin the formal separation process. Ethan's response was immediate. He froze the joint credit card and removed me from the family phone plan. He also contacted the realtor and tried to revive the purchase of the larger house using a different lender. That lender called my business office to verify income. I stated clearly that I was not applying for a mortgage. The application stopped. Ethan told his relatives I was sabotaging his attempt to house his mother. Melissa posted a message in the family group saying, "Some people would rather destroy a marriage than share one room." For a moment, I almost answered with the spreadsheet. I wanted to expose every number and every lie. Rebecca advised me not to turn a legal and financial dispute into a family spectacle. So I wrote only one sentence. I will discuss the house through the appropriate process, not through group messages. Then I left the group. The lowest point came 3 weeks later. I was sitting alone in the temporary office after midnight, correcting reports for the client I had lost. I had promised to complete the transition without charging them for the final month. On the desk beside me was a photo from the day Ethan and I bought our house. We stood on the front steps holding a set of keys between us. His arm was around my shoulders. I remembered believing that shared ownership meant shared safety. For years, I had told myself that Ethan was overwhelmed, that Diane was grieving, that Melissa did not understand the finances, and that one more explanation could restore fairness. The truth was harder. I had kept paying because being useful felt safer than discovering whether I was loved without the usefulness. I could not control whether Ethan understood what he had done. I could control whether he was allowed to do it again. That night, I signed the separation petition. I also signed a 6-month lease on a permanent office suite for my business. It was not financially convenient. It meant reducing my own salary and delaying a software upgrade I had planned. But the office had a locking door, secure internet, and my name on the lease. The next morning, I sent Ethan a formal proposal through Rebecca. We could obtain an independent appraisal of the house. After that, he could attempt to buy out my interest through refinancing. Or we could agree to sell. He rejected the proposal. He insisted the house should remain his primary residence because Diane was living there and because, according to him, he had been the main financial provider throughout our marriage. His attorney requested mediation. Ethan chose a mediation office near the title company, where we had originally planned to close on the larger house. He asked that Diane attend because her housing was affected. Melissa came as Diane's support person. I agreed. By then, I was no longer trying to convince them that my work mattered. I was bringing records. The mediator, a woman named Carol, began by explaining that she was not there to punish anyone or decide the divorce. Her job was to help us explore temporary housing and financial arrangements. Ethan spoke first. He said he had supported me while I experimented with self-employment. He said I had become financially controlling once the business started earning money. He said moving Diane into the office was a temporary act of compassion and that I had used it as an excuse to cancel the family's future. Diane nodded through most of it. Melissa added that Ethan had always handled the real bills. Carol turned to me. I placed one folder on the table. Before we discuss the future, I need one factual question answered. I looked at Ethan. Which account paid the mortgage on March 1st? He frowned. Our joint account. And where did the money in that account come from? Both of us. I opened the first record. It showed deposits into the joint account for the previous 12 months. My transfers were marked in one column. His were marked in another. I did not give a speech. I read the totals. I had deposited $84,000. Ethan had deposited $22,000. Melissa leaned toward the page. That can't be right. Louise had prepared a signed summary of the records. But I also brought the original statements, so no one had to trust the summary alone. Carol checked several months at random. The numbers matched. Ethan said his separate account covered other expenses. I opened the second folder. It contained every major household payment for 4 years. Mortgage, taxes, homeowner's insurance, roof repair, furnace replacement, utilities, and groceries. Some payments came directly from me. Most came from the joint account funded primarily by my deposits. Then I placed the original closing statement on the table. It showed my $45,000 down payment. Diane stared at Ethan. You said the down payment came from your commission bonus. He shifted in his chair. I said we used family money. No, she said slowly. You said you paid for the house. For the first time, her anger was not directed at me. Ethan accused me of humiliating him over bookkeeping details. Carol interrupted. These are not details if the parties are negotiating who can afford to retain the property. I opened the third folder. It showed the transfers to Diane. I explained that I had agreed to $600 a month. The records showed more than $33,000 transferred over 18 months. Diane's face went pale. I didn't receive $33,000. That surprised me. Ethan quickly said the total included expenses he paid on her behalf. I asked him to identify them. He listed rent, car repairs, medical bills, and groceries. I had brought copies of Diane's rent ledger and the repair invoice because I had paid the mechanic directly. Several large transfers did not correspond with any of those expenses. One payment for $2,800 was labeled Mom Lease. Diane said she had never received it. Another for $1,900 was marked medical. She had been covered by Medicare and a supplemental policy that month. Her out-of-pocket statement showed less than $200. Ethan's attorney asked for a break. Before anyone stood, I placed the fourth document on the table. It was the Phase 2 housing plan. Ethan's face changed when he saw the title. I asked him whether he had created it. He said it was an unfinished draft. I asked whether he had uploaded it to the lender. He said he might have included it by mistake. I asked whether the line about my looking cruel had also been a mistake. No one spoke. Carol read the sentence aloud. Once Mom is established, Claire will not reverse the decision without looking cruel. Diane closed her eyes. Melissa looked at her brother as though she were seeing him from a different distance. Ethan finally said, I was trying to prevent Claire from backing out of every decision because she gets anxious about money. I turned to him. You moved your mother into my office because you believed shame would keep me from saying no. I was trying to create stability. For whom? For the family. Then why did your plan require my income, my equity, my savings, and my silence, while giving me the smallest workspace in the new house? He had no answer that matched the version he had presented. So he changed versions. He said I had always wanted a commercial office anyway. Priya had provided the co-working invoices and the date I first requested emergency space. They showed that I rented the office only after my equipment was dismantled. He said Diane's move had been temporary. I produced the address change confirmations dated 2 days before I came home. He said I knew about the move. I showed the messages he sent that morning asking what time I would return, without mentioning Diane or the furniture delivery. 3 details from that first day now meant something different. The new bed had been ordered in advance. Diane's mail had been redirected before she arrived. And Ethan had deliberately confirmed I would be away long enough for the room to be cleared. He had not made a rushed decision. He had managed a schedule. Carol asked Diane what Ethan had told her. She hesitated for so long that Melissa reached for her hand. Finally, Diane said, "He told me the house was mostly his. He said Claire's business was unstable and that the new house would be paid for after he received a promotion." Ethan interrupted. "That is not what I said." Diane looked at him. "You told me she would complain at first, but that she always came around after you reminded her how much you had supported her." The room went still. That was the part no bank statement could have shown. He had not only lied about money. He had rewritten our marriage for his family, turning my years of support into a debt I supposedly owed him. Melissa pushed the spreadsheet away. "I defended you publicly." Ethan snapped. "Because you understood Mom needed help." "No," she said, "because you told me Claire was living off you." He looked toward his attorney. His attorney did not rescue him. He only asked that the discussion return to the property options. Carol summarized the financial reality. Based on the income documentation, Ethan was unlikely to qualify for a refinance large enough to buy out my interest, while also supporting Diane at the current level. That was not a legal ruling. It was a practical obstacle confirmed by the pre-qualification letters both sides had submitted. The house would either need to be sold, or Ethan would need another qualified source of funds. There was none. The first consequence happened in that room. Ethan agreed to list the house. He did not agree because he suddenly respected me. He agreed because the numbers left him no affordable way to keep what he had treated as his. Then he demanded that Diane be allowed to remain until closing. I said she could stay during the listing period if 3 conditions were written into the agreement. My former office would be restored for showings. No business property of mine would be touched. And I would not pay Diane's personal expenses after the end of that month. Ethan called the conditions cruel. I answered with the shortest sentence I had spoken during our marriage. "You can call them cruel and still follow them." Diane began crying. For years, that sound would have made me abandon my position. This time, I waited. Melissa asked whether Diane could stay with her temporarily. She did not sound enthusiastic, but she sounded honest. Diane refused. She said Melissa's house was too crowded. Carol asked what other options existed. I slid the senior apartment applications across the table. They were the same programs I had researched months earlier. 2 still had openings. Diane looked at the papers and whispered, "I thought I would be living in the new house." "I know," I said, "but that promise was made with money and consent Ethan did not have." The house went on the market 6 weeks later. Preparing it for sale was painful in ways I had not expected. The queen bed was removed from my office. My desk was brought back, but I no longer worked there. The room looked staged and hollow, with a small lamp and an empty bookshelf. Buyers walked through the house and discussed knocking down walls. Each comment reminded me that the place I had tried so hard to preserve was already becoming someone else's possibility. The house sold after 3 months. The proceeds remained in escrow while our attorneys worked through the division. I did not receive every dollar I believed I had contributed, and Ethan did not walk away with nothing. Joint ownership was more complicated than moral arithmetic. But the records mattered. My original down payment, business contributions, and documented payments became part of the negotiated settlement. I recovered enough to start again without carrying the entire cost of Ethan's decisions. Ethan rented a 2-bedroom apartment. For the first time, he had to decide how much of his own income he could spend supporting his mother after paying his own housing expenses. The answer was far less than $33,000. Diane eventually accepted a 1-bedroom apartment in a senior community 12 minutes from Melissa. She had to sell the dining table that would not fit. She blamed me for that for a while. Then she learned where some of the transfers marked with her name had actually gone. During financial disclosure, Ethan's separate account showed that several of those transfers had covered his credit card balances, a leased SUV, and speculative sports betting deposits. He had labeled them as support for his mother when moving money out of the joint account. I did not pursue a criminal accusation. My attorney handled the records through the divorce process, where they affected the financial negotiations. Diane stopped calling me cruel after that. She did not apologize immediately. Her first message said only, "I did not know." I replied, "You knew my office was full when you moved into it." 3 days later, she sent another message. "You are right. I knew enough to ask, and I chose not to." That was the closest thing to accountability I received from her. Melissa deleted her public message and apologized to me privately. I told her I appreciated the apology, but I would not return to the family group or discuss my finances with her again. She accepted that. Ethan never gave me a clean apology. He said he had been under pressure. He said he had made mistakes. He said the spreadsheet reflected fear, not manipulation. He said I had reacted too severely by ending the marriage. Maybe he truly believed those things. By then, I no longer needed to correct every version. The divorce took almost a year. My business survived, although the client I lost never returned. I replaced that account eventually, but I could not undo the late payroll or recover the trust that disappeared with it. That loss stayed with me. So did the knowledge that I had ignored my own financial instincts because I wanted peace at home. I bought a smaller townhouse on the north side of Columbus. It had 2 bedrooms and a narrow staircase that made moving furniture difficult. The kitchen needed new cabinets, and there was no maple tree outside. But the 2nd bedroom had a solid door. I turned it into an office. The first item I hung on the wall was my framed business license. The corner was still scratched from the day it had been thrown onto the carpet. I considered replacing the frame. Instead, I left it as it was. A month after I moved in, Priya came over with coffee and helped me install a shelf above the printer. When we finished, she asked whether I wanted a spare key hidden somewhere. I looked at the new lock on the office door. "No," I said. "I know exactly who has access now." That evening, I sat at my desk and processed payroll for a new client. Outside the window, the lights of neighboring homes came on one by one. For years, I had believed a shared home was proof that I belonged somewhere. Now I understood that belonging without consent was only another form of being used. The printer was no longer in the hallway. It was exactly where I had chosen to put it. Thank you for listening to RedditGossipR. Subscribe so you do not miss the next stories.